Welcome to the workshop on graduate applications in political science. A little bit of outline for the day. I will first try to introduce Project EduAccess in case this is your first time encountering us or attending one of our workshops. I will also introduce our lovely panelists who have taken time off their weekend to be with us here. A general overview of what political science as a field and master's and postgraduate applications in the field entail. We've divided the session into two halves. Number one, we will cover the master's program in political science. Firstly, we'll try to introduce what the course structure might look like, what to expect at a master's program, a little bit on the nomenclature, how are different courses designed and sort of talked about, what are different titles for courses in case you're confused from one university to another. A little bit about the country and the university, how you can go about choosing what is best for you, what are the things you might want to consider when you're choosing an application for a specific country or a university. In a similar line, we will then delve into PhD program and similarly try to talk about the course structure, what all entails in a PhD program. Again, a little bit on the nomenclature if, in case some words or phrases confuse you because some PhD programs are called different in other parts of the world. A little bit about some factual information on how you should navigate on which country or university best works for you, and then career prospects in academia in general and political science more broadly, some general tips from our panelists, and eventually we'll move and open the floor for a Q&A session, which will be moderated by myself, and here you can feel free to just talk to our panelists one-on-one. So a little bit about Project EduAccess. Project EduAccess was born out of a realization that access to higher education, leadership, and professional opportunities is marred with barriers, especially for marginalized communities in the Global South. With this realization, Project EduAccess is a modest and humble attempt to try to improve inclusivity and provide spaces for those who come from marginalized communities. We try to do this with 4 key initiatives, including mentoring, counseling, and role modeling. Number 2, information, advice, and guidance. Number 3, capacity building and leadership skill development. And finally, evidence-based advocacy. If you have any questions about Project EduAccess or how to navigate through any form of leadership, educational opportunities, feel free to go to our website or Instagram page. We're also active on our LinkedIn, and any sort of application guidance can also be sort of looked over on our YouTube page where we post all of our recordings and is up to date. Lovely. So we are joined with us by 3 brilliant, kind panelists, and I am the lucky one who gets to moderate and also introduce them and their lovely work. We had with us firstly Prarthana Puthran. Prarthana has a master's but is currently now doing a PhD in political science from Sciences Po, Paris. Prarthana speaks English, Hindi, and Marathi. We are also joined with Dr. Claire Crawford. Dr. Claire Crawford is a teaching associate at the University of Cambridge and has completed her PhD in political science from King's College London. Dr. Crawford speaks English and French. Finally, we're also joined by Dr. Sudhir Selvaraj, who is an assistant professor and a senior lecturer at University of Bradford, who also completed his PhD at King's College London in political science. Dr. Sudhir Selvaraj speaks English and Tamil. As for myself, my name is Asma Shakeel, and I am reading for an MSc in Global Imperial History at the University of Oxford, and I speak English, Urdu, and Kashmiri. With that, I think we are ready to start the session, and I hand it over to lovely Prarthana.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Today I will be talking about the master's degree, giving an overview about what a master's degree in political science looks like. Political science programs usually explore governance, public policy, political theory, comparative politics, and these degrees are usually important if you're going and if you wish to pursue a career in academia, policy making, a public service, or also if you want to work in an NGO or international organization. For people, of course, they have different options available at the moment. Like you can go to the USA, the UK, Canada, Australia, and Europe, since they offer specialized degrees in different areas of political science. Can you go to the next slide, please? Um, so core modules will include political theory, comparative politics, like said before. So in masters in political science, also there are different types. So there might be some masters which will be very general and very broad. Like for instance, if you're doing a masters in political science, you will have electives from all these components. You will have electives from political theory. You will have electives from public policy, but then, like for example, in University of Oxford, you have a specialized degree as well. Like so, you might be doing an MSc in international relations, and not necessarily the broader political science. So again, it depends on what you want to study and what is your goal after your masters, right? So depending on that, I think choosing the master's degree makes more sense. And if you're doing MSc, usually MSc degrees in the UK are around 1 year. But like I did my master's at Sciences and my degree was a little broader. So it was master's in political science and it was a 2 years degree. So again, it depends on how long do you want to study your master's for, what do you want to do after it. So that I think helps you to make a decision about which masters to go for. Can we go to the next slide, please? So nomenclature of master's degree, I think it's very important to understand what degree you are applying for so that you can know if this is something, if this is the right fit for you, and if this is in alignment to what you want to do ahead. So MSc degrees usually focus on more research methods and quantitative analysis, and they're usually offered in some course in some particular universities, like you have the UCL. The title also will indicate the disciplinary focus, like I told before. So if you're doing an MSc in political theory, it is specialized in a way, right? So you will not be discussing the broader aspect and everything that comes under political science. um, if you're doing MA in political science, it would have a little more theoretical approach and it would have more grounding. The degree that I did at Sciences Po was a research master's, and it was in political science. So I had electives from basically every component of political science. So I had courses from public policy, I had courses from international relations, and I had courses from political behavior as well. So for someone who's not sure what is your specialization or what do you actually like in political science, I think it is great, right? Because you get to study different aspects, and once you've studied in great detail, because at undergrad level you do not have that much exposure to make a decision that okay, I am going to focus only on international relations or public policy, right? So the master's degree, if you're not clear about what you want to do, I think then doing a more holistic master's makes sense, so that you have electives in every component, and then you can make an informed choice that okay, this is the specialization I want to go for. And then there are also some programs that have interdisciplinary approaches. For instance, there have been a lot of political economy programs, and a lot of people in the US are also hiring at least two political economy PhD students every year. So that is also an upcoming field. So if you're interested in economics and political science, I think that is the degree that you should be looking for. Can we go to the next slide? So master's courses, choosing the country. So of course the examples that have been given, I just wanted to make sure that these are they offer these courses, but then there are other courses to it also. So like they also offer like masters in research design and everything else. But when it comes to choosing the country, I think there are other factors also you need to take into consideration. Of course, you want to consider what is the course structure looking like, and will it does it align with what you want to do. Second is what you want to do after the course. Okay, so if you want to go in academia, you look at if people who have done the course from that particular university or that particular region have gone ahead to do things that you want to do. And when you're choosing country, I think it is also very important to look at what kind of environment you will be in. So when I was choosing my degree, I can speak from experience. When I was choosing degree, I was seeing if the city that I'm flying to has public transport, because I was very clear that I need a city that has a very good connectivity and public transport. Second was, what are the activities available? Because I think we don't realize when you're moving abroad, you are basically uprooting yourself and you're placing yourself in a new social environment. So it is very important for you to have life other than your studies. So the second thing I checked was, what are the activities, right? So Paris fit the bill, because there's always something to do. Like there's always a museum exhibition that's going on, or there's a concert, or you can just go and walk in the park. There's abundant of nature here. So that was one of the criterias I thought about. And then, because also France has a really good social welfare system. They have so if you are a scholarship student, you get 1 euro meals. So you're basically spending nothing on eating, right? And plus you also have a lot of benefits. So if you're under 26, you get to go to museums for free. You get housing assistance from the government, and you also get discounts on train tickets. So these were the factors that sort of motivated me to choose France and like go for Europe. But again, like when you're choosing the country, of course you need to focus on the course, but you also need to focus on the kind of environment you will be in. So it's a good practice to talk to people who have already done the degree and already have done the course, to get a sense of if the workload is something that you will be able to put up to, and is the social environment good enough. Because I don't think it's a good idea for you to leave your home, come here and be stuck in a toxic environment. I think that's not good for mental health. So I think these are some criterias you also need to take into consideration, because you're going to invest a lot, and you will be living in this place for a year or two, right? So it is a big investment. So I think when you're choosing your country, these are the factors that play a major role in making a decision, because at the end of the day, you're going to be there and you have to survive the degree. And trust me, like for me, even if like my degree was very tough, coming out and seeing the Eiffel Tower made it a lot easier. So I think you need to be very sure, have a good friend circle. It is very important when you are studying and surviving abroad. Yeah, can we go to the next slide, please? Choosing university, of course, like when you are narrowing down, so whenever someone asks me for advice, I think what I usually say is, choose where you want to study, right? Which region you want to study. Do you see yourself like studying in Europe, Australia? Because all these different regions offer like a different kind of academic environment, right? So you need to make sure that, okay, where do you see yourself fit in? Because I think you understand yourself best, right? How you function best. So I think the European lifestyle was something I was very comfortable with, a little work-life balance, a little traveling, a little social welfare. So that is how I decided that, okay, Europe is the place for me. And then I sort of, started looking at different universities. So once you're, clear, and it's okay even if you want to, look at two regions, that's perfectly fine. But I think before you start, it's very good to know that, okay, I want to apply for these countries, so that you're clear in mind that, okay, this is what you're going for. First is, of course, program specialization. What do you want to specialize in? And also, it is a good practice to look at the syllabus. So most of the universities upload their syllabus online. So look at what the course is offering. So for instance, like I can give the Sciences Po example. So Sciences Po has a school of research, and they have Paris School of International Affairs. So if you're doing economics, there are courses under SIA, that is like the Paris School of International Affairs, and there are some courses in research school, right? But if you're going to take the degree at the research school, it is going to be very quant heavy, it is going to be very math heavy degree. So if you're someone who's looking more towards the policy side, and more towards, if you're interested in working towards international organizations, I think it makes more sense to go with a degree at the SIA School of International Affairs than for masters in research, right? So before coming, again, talk to people who have done the degree. I think it makes it so much clear. And a lot of people are actually willing to do, like, if you drop a polite message on LinkedIn, a lot of them will be more than willing to, like, get on a call with you and talk about their experience and also guide you, right? In case of, you are not sure if this is the degree or you want to do for yourself. Then faculty expertise, look for what kind of research people are doing. If you want to do a research degree, do you have enough people who have, similar research interests in mind? That is something that you should look up to. QS rankings, like, of course, like, like, it is a good. I would not. I think I'll admit I also used QS rankings as a means, because at that time, like, Sionpo was ranked second in political science, and I was at this phase that, oh, I'm just going to apply to the top 10 universities in QS rankings. But then I also realized that sometimes QS rankings might not be the best. I think it's good to have benchmark to know that, okay, like, this is how the universities are ranked. But then it's not the last word as well. Okay, so, like, take it with a pinch of salt. Facilities, very important. What does the university offer? What are the resources that they have? What are the networking opportunities that they have? um One of the reasons I chose Yonspo, because they had a research grant, they even for master's student. So if you want to write a master's thesis, and if you want to do field work, the School of Research would give you money for that. And I think that was very important, in terms of research and in terms of development, like my development as a researcher. So the kind of opportunities the university gives will play a very important role. So check out on that. And again, you will come to know about this more as you talk to different people. And prioritize universities that are known for their strengths. See, every university will have some degrees that are really good, and that is their core offering. And then there will be some degrees that just exist for them to make money. You need to not fall into the latter category, right? You need to make sure that the money that you're investing is in the courses that they're good. Like, some courses at one university might be great. The other courses that are offered at the same university might not be that great, right? So I think you need to, like, read up more and ensure that you're not investing yourself in a course that is just a money making business for the university. So again, that is something that you will realize as and when you talk to people, and get more clarity on this. Okay, so now I will hand it over to Claire.
I think this slide is still about masters.
Okay, sorry, there was some miscommunication probably. So, yeah, so how to pick your specialization? Again, like, you need to be true to your interest. It should reflect deeply about your research interest. If you know that you're someone who wants to do public policy, do not go for a degree in political theory, right? So be very sure, and also be sure that even if you're going for a degree, see if the syllabus is something that you want to study, because sometimes, like, the degree can be broad, and it can be difficult to make a choice. And also think about the outcomes and practical skills about what you're going to do after the degree ends, right? So I was sure that I wanted to go in academia, not very very sure, but, like, I had a idea, so that is why I chose for a research masters. And that sort of helped my transition from masters to PhD. So depending on what your goals are, it makes more sense to take that degree. Okay, I will now hand over to Claire.
Yeah. Good morning, morning here in London. Good afternoon, everyone. I think that was especially those last points about the changing nature of the master's courses. There are a lot of these kind of not very good courses that are trying to recruit international students. Unfortunately, it's very exploitative. So I think that's very good advice to look out for those. Especially, unfortunately, I must say, in the UK. Okay, but I'm going to talk about PhD courses where this kind of structure is less of a problem. So that's one piece of good news. So PhD courses, probably more than masters, really vary according to region. So we have a slide on that in a couple of slides. So it's very important to think about things like duration of the course, structure of the course, funding opportunities, the process of even doing admissions, and also Prarthana made a very good point about culture, and that is the case. Like your social life and the culture of the place really feeds into your experience as well. So it's important to think about. Um, Obviously, I'm speaking as somebody from the UK who did my PhD in the UK, so my knowledge of that is only secondhand. But I will point to things that I know, and then in the Q&A, people can pick up on any questions with Sudhir and Prarthana. So generally, this is very generally speaking across all PhD programs. The first few years will involve like set coursework, especially in theory and methodology. It depends on how much of this you've done before, how much you will need to focus on this. But as a general rule, you will start with this and then move into your own independent research and writing up later in the degree. Obviously, in the end, you produce a thesis, or in some cases, 3 papers. This is still quite unusual in political science, but it does exist at some universities. So if you hear people talking about the 3-paper method, it's when you write 3 research papers instead of a full thesis. This is only available for quantitative research at the moment, as far as I know. And it's more common in economics. So you might see political economy degrees that offer this. So all PhDs require extensive research, which should be original, specific, and viable. This is a big difference from the masters. And it's also why the programs are always longer. So at least 3 years, that's the shortest. So it's a huge time commitment. And that's very important to bear in mind. And yeah, so we've already touched on this. Beyond just country and program, you really need to think about all sorts of things. The cost of living will vary hugely, even between different cities in countries. So you might think of the UK as a very expensive country, and it is, but it would be a lot cheaper to live outside of London. But the funding that you may be able to access will not vary that much. So this is something that it's really important to research, especially if funding is not going to be available for the whole program. Things like immigration systems, obviously the unfortunate state of the world is that some countries are going to be a lot stricter than others. Emotional support systems. Prarthana spoke about this already. Extracurricular and social opportunities are so important. I think what she said is even more the case for PhD because you are moving for longer. And also why you want to do a PhD. You're really going to have to motivate yourself to do, I mean, it can be so grueling doing independent research. So you really need to want to do the research. You really need to love your research to get yourself through that, because you're not always going to love it. There are going to be times when you really want to quit. Okay, next slide, please. I'll touch on this briefly. I would say that most of this information is available online, but it is very important to bear in mind that there are various names. So Doctor of Philosophy is what PhD is short for, so philosophy doctorate. The word doctorate, the word PhD, Oxford is an outlier. Anyone thinking of applying to Oxford or Cambridge will see that they like to do everything their own way. So at Oxford they call it a DPhil. I think that's most of the different titles. And then in terms of what the course is called, don't worry too much about this. Most universities, the name of the department and the name of the program don't necessarily reflect on the name of the degree at the end. There will be time later to become more specific or more broad depending on what your aspirations are after. But yeah, often you will see political science, but some places it will just be called politics. And obviously that's still a very broad category. So you may get degrees in political theory, government and politics, government and policy, government and public policy. All of these terms may cover broadly the same thing. So that's why it's very important to look into what the department specializes in and what kind of training will be available. I've included on this slide some useful websites which have listings of available PhD programs, but also just information about different PhD programs in different places, because these will vary institution to institution, sometimes even department to department within the same institution. So if you're not sure, I would say try and reach out to someone at that institution. Or as I say, there is lots of information available online. Next slide, please. So I think the three of us have all done our PhDs or are completing PhDs in Europe. But I will say that my knowledge of what happens in the USA is that the programs are a lot longer, sometimes up to 7 years, and the funding is usually more generous if you can get it. So it may be more competitive. I'm actually not really sure on the statistics there. Obviously, more prestigious, quote unquote, so higher in the QS rankings, universities are more competitive, but they are more prestigious, so this may improve your career opportunities, but it is harder to get in at the beginning. With the generous funding, sometimes comes required teaching within that, so you will be expected to help teach undergraduates. Canada is very similar to the US. It's kind of a North America model, but there is less coursework and it's slightly closer to the European model in that respect. In the UK, there is quite a specific feature of UK academia where students do not necessarily need institutional or external funding. People will be privately funding their degree. That is very unusual in the US. And I'm not sure most institutions even allow it. With that said, and I think feeding into that is the fact that the PhDs are generally a lot shorter. So you will only have 3 to 4 years. Most people take 4 years. It's very unusual to complete a PhD within 3 years. That said, the funding is usually only for 3 years. So this is something to bear in mind, that whatever amount that is given annually may be expected to stretch over a longer period in reality. So you should try and budget at least broadly at the beginning for the whole period rather than annually. That said, in the UK, teaching opportunities and other work opportunities are paid separately, but because they're employed rather than as part of your degree, they are considered paid work. So there will be a limit to what you can do on a student visa. So all of these things you should try and work out before when you're doing your budgeting. In Europe, so Prarthana is the best person to ask about this. I would say a big difference is that English is not going to be the language of the city that you live in, most likely. So even though the universities may function partly in English, not all of them function entirely in English. So Sciences Po is fairly unusual, within France at least, in that English is the main language. So are you planning on learning French? If you're not at Sciences Po, you would probably need to. And then this will vary by institution. Northern European universities and Italy are the most likely to have programs in English, in political science at least. Yeah, this is a case-by-case basis as well, but just bear in mind, most young people in Europe do speak at least a level of English now, and most academics will, but it may not be the main language of the city or even the other students, which could be exclusionary, at least at first, from a social perspective. So again, important to remember. Australia, obviously a kind of emerging I don't want to say market, but it's becoming increasingly popular for international students. Particularly, there's quite often a focus on Asia Pacific issues and South Asian studies. So this could be quite good in terms of working with people who are more interested in working on, for example, India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, if that is something that you're focusing on. Because in Europe and the US, you can be sidelined slightly. Sometimes work on India is considered to be area studies, which I think everybody here would think is not a good categorization, but nonetheless, it is good to bear in mind. One big difference with Australia is that the academic calendar starts in March, but you can usually start a PhD at different points in the year. It's just that might be slightly out of kilter with academic calendars elsewhere. Okay, slide please. Okay, so this is fairly similar to the master's information. Research focus, I would say, is less important because you will be doing something that is incredibly specific yourself. You are becoming the expert in your own field. So you want overlaps rather than necessarily a lot of people working on one topic. So it would be good to have people working maybe on the same region or the same topic. For example, maybe there's a few other people working on populism or gender. But you also will want overlaps in terms of methods and theory, and that's how you will build kind of a community. So don't worry too much if there's nobody working specifically on the same thing as you. Supervision and mentorship. The relationship with your supervisor is generally the most important thing in European PhDs. So you will have a kind of one-on-one, maybe one-on-two if you have a secondary supervisor who's very involved, relationship with them, and they are responsible for supporting you and also kind of assessing you throughout your PhD. So that's a very unique and I would say actually often quite intense relationship. In the US, you have more of a panel and you don't necessarily have such an intense one-on-one relationship until after the first couple of years. Nonetheless, you need to be able to work with these people. They are both supporting you and assessing you through your PhD. So it's really great to try and start building that relationship before you even apply. So reach out to people that you might want to supervise your work and start building that relationship. You'll also get an idea from doing that if they're interested and supportive. Funding and scholarships, this generally, I think, for most people is crucial. You need to be able to afford to live. A PhD is not like a break from your life. It's a big commitment. It's 3-4 years of your life. So will you have enough money to live and also to do your research? So as Prarthana said, travel grants, this kind of thing. These may be within the institution, and it's really good if they are, but there are also external opportunities in every country as well. So for example, in Europe, maybe there is EU funding. It won't just be EU funding that called that. It'll be kind of narrowed down by region or topic. So do have a look at those websites I put on the previous slide. There is information about additional funding. Yeah, only some programs have attached funding for maintenance. So you need to be quite careful when you're looking at what's available. Some scholarships are only for tuition, so this would not be money to live. A full scholarship or studentship, again, the language can be quite varied, fellowship also. A full fellowship would involve living costs. Just because it says a number doesn't mean that that matches up with the cost of living, particularly in the UK. In London, the number will not be enough to live particularly comfortably. You would also probably need to work or have additional supplementary income from another source. So this is all very important to think about. Research facilities, just as Prarthana said, but more important because you are doing independent research. Do they have the computing power, for example, if you're doing a big quantitative project, to work with the data? Do they have access to the key data sets, or would you have to apply for a grant to buy those? All of this will be important when you're writing your application as well, because you can use the fact that they have adequate resources as evidence of why you are applying to that institution and why it's a good match. Slide, please. Okay, that's everything I have to say, but if anyone has any questions for me, then please do let me know in the Q&A, and I'm going to hand over to Sudhir.
Thanks, Claire, and thanks, Prarthana. So I'm here to talk about career prospects. And with the PhD, as you can imagine, there is a wide range of perspectives and skills you'll build over the years, whether it's 3 to 4 in the in the UK, or more in the US. And I've put this down primarily from my experiences. So post the PhD, where would I go after that? And that being said, it is also important for you all to think in advance, right? The academic job market is quite difficult as it is right now for people in PhDs, including myself. So in the UK, there is a large number of layoffs coming as well for academics and such. So I do want to caution you with as much respect and love for the field, but maybe academia might not be what you want to consider later on, but there is a whole range of other prospects to go to with your PhD, and that's what's important, because the PhD really should be a focus on structured thinking, learning more about a particular topic, problem solving, creativity. Academia is one outlet, but there are tons of others. So within academia, of course, the research and teaching side at a university level, the first would be in politics departments or tangibly related, political economy, etc. But there is a range of interdisciplinary departments. So both my academic positions have been in interdisciplinary departments. At King's, I was in the Department of International Development, and now I'm in the Peace Studies and International Development Department at the University of Bradford. Both have their merits, and again, this is on the assumption that there is a choice and an abundance of jobs. But if you focus primarily on a politics focused department, you really get to unpack the politics of it all, right? And looking at it from different countries and different parts of the world, different theoretical perspectives, different specializations. Interdisciplinary departments allow you to make comparisons across departments. I found significant benefit of talking to colleagues in geography, talking to colleagues in global health and such, to make me think about broader questions of inequality, etc., while I was doing my own work. Secondary school teaching is still a very good option. I think, particularly in the UK, you would have to, if I'm right, Claire, you would have to do the PGC, so postgraduate certificate of education afterwards. But with the experience that you have in politics, there is a wonderful opportunity and lots of jobs available. Am I right, Claire?
Yes, certainly you would be expected to do an additional qualification most of the time. There is a slight exception in that some private schools wouldn't require that straight away. So it could be an option if you were looking for a job.
Absolutely, and sadly, the way academia is paid, secondary school teaching is almost at par in some cases, particularly the more years you've served. Importantly, I haven't put charities and nonprofit sector, but that is a great place as well, because tons of organizations require your research skills in terms of qualitative and quantitative research work, but your advocacy skills, communication skills, policy consultancy and advisory as well. Government, particularly in the UK, and I can speak there more authoritatively, you can work in your local government council. So a friend of mine, for example, works in the social housing unit for Camden Council in London. Her entire focus is on policy and research, largely to do with local politics. But equally so, if you're wanting to work in the government, there are a range of options to work on in the civil service. Of course, some will determine on your citizenship, so you can't work with the FCDO, you can't work with defense, but everything from environment to transportation to education are all very good opportunities to work with. Think tanks and political risk analysis, I club those together. Think tanks think about, say, Eurasia Group or other organizations like the Carnegie Institute of Peace, etc., will usually focus on a certain area. And here your job is largely to write, to think, to research. The teaching component will be a little less. So if you like doing what you do and researching and thinking about things, but not necessarily the teaching part, think tanks and political risk analysis might be a better avenue for you. But there's a whole range of other opportunities not to do with politics. And that's where I think the PhD actually gives you a solid benefit. Learning and development consultants or coordinators will help corporations, businesses, nonprofit sector groups to learn and develop and skill up colleagues. And I would highly recommend looking into that because for me, as much as I love politics, I enjoy teaching politics more than researching the politics of it all. So this part is a really good opportunity. Uh, you can completely leave all of this behind and go into business consultancy or management consultancy and advisory and taxation, etc. Organizations, particularly in the large Big Four organizations, emphasize critical thinking and communication skills. And to get into those fields, you'll be tested on that, but then you end up being trained for 2 years after that. As an associate for those organizations. Your research project itself is a large project. So to manage it, to learn how, so you can transition to a job in project management as well with that as an example of it. But those skills of communication, time management, stakeholder analysis, stakeholder management are all built into the PhD. And that's something you could potentially move into. Higher education administration, particularly in research focused jobs, right? So all universities also have wonderful professional staff colleagues who support the work and functioning of the university. So the research office, the marketing office, the communications office, project administration, etc., are all wonderful jobs where if you enjoy being around the university, but don't particularly want to do the research and the teaching part, this is a great role to just be around university and the opportunities that that provides. There is an example of a space to get into in terms of publishing. So organizations like Oxford University Press, Cambridge University Press, Rutledge, etc., are always looking for people who are looking to pick up other authors, right? So you, as an experienced uh, politics person, can help look through proposals, meet with other political scientists, try to figure out what is in the market requires, etc. And that is a really useful, interesting thing. And then the last part is, again, using those qualitative research skills, but in UX design and UI design. So user experience and user interface. Again, it requires a little bit of training and transition, but those qualitative skills you get from research would be really useful. Next slide, please, Asma. Thank you so much. I put these 4 very broad tips, and I'm pretty sure Claire and Prarthana would have many, many more to add. So let me start off, and then we can open it up, of course. My personal preference is kind and supportive supervisors over celebrity supervisors. And I say this for a few reasons. One is particularly if you are an international student, everything is new, as Pratna said. It's a lot of time to get used to things. But because, especially in the UK, if it's an independent research project, you're pushed into the deep end, right? At this stage, it is somebody who is able to work through things with you. I'm not saying handhold or babysit, but generally just saying, look, I understand things are new and interesting. Let's try to figure out a plan that works best for us. Celebrity supervisors are spectacular for opening doors and reference letters. Kind supervisors are really good about getting you across the line and making sure you learn and do the best research you can. So that's my personal preference, but of course, try to figure out what works best for you. Perhaps you are, in fact, one of those PhD students who's incredibly well motivated and can just really work well with a limited amount of time with a supervisor. If that's the case, then perhaps a celebrity supervisor is the best. But this was just my personal experience. Um, Academia might be one of the only jobs on the planet where you just figure out your day according to what works best for you. So, for example, some days I'm up at 6 working, some days I'm up late at night working, while classes and meetings are the only fixed things I have. And it's the same thing with PhD, right? You are in charge of making your own schedule and such. it's also one of the only jobs where you get to actually just sit and read because that's your job, right? Like the chance to talk to people and challenge ideas and question each other. And it's a wonderful space, but it's not a utopia. And I really want you all to know that when we get into um, academia, we assume that we are all on the same page, fighting for the same injustice against the same injustices, uh, supporting each other. But sadly, academia also does replicate, perpetuate, and mirror some of the other injustices that we see in other parts of the working world. So I would really like you, and we can unpack that a little later, but I would really like us all to be aware of that, because sadly, if we're going in with rose tinted glasses, um, you're going to be let down, sadly. But to support that is really important to just build your support systems, whether it's friends, family at home, but also within the university space. You'll find that your support systems are very broad. They will be members of your student hall, your flatmates, um, members of your own department, other departments. Your friends groups will suddenly range from 21-year-old master students to 65, 70-year-old professors. And that is wonderful, right? Because you're learning from a range of people who bring in different perspectives and experiences. And that is what is going to help build your resilience, because a lot of people think PhD is about intelligence and smarts. Sure, it has some element of that, but really it is all about resilience, your determination, and your ability to keep your head down and get the job done, irrespective of all the challenges that come with it. And sadly, there are quite a lot of challenges that come with it too. So I want you all to keep that in mind. But the last part is, it's going to push you out of your comfort zone. While that sounds really nerve wracking, it is also really exciting, right? I can say this having come out of it on the other side. At different points of time, like Claire said, there was genuine questions saying, why am I doing what I'm doing? Uh, and now I've come out of it being a better trained professional as an academic, but also as a more resilient human being, as a kinder human being, I would like to think, as generally a more supportive human being. And that happened largely from pushing myself out of my boundaries, struggling, getting my feet wet, getting just really demolished sometimes, but then building yourself up each time. And that's something I would really challenge you all to do. So if you're looking for a nice, comfortable ride, you might not learn a lot more. So really work hard, and that helps. And I'll leave you with a quote from Ted Lasso, which is one of my new favorite TV shows. Um, it is, the harder you work, the luckier you tend to get. And there's no other substitute for hard work in this entire process. So opportunities are there, and it will work out if you work. And they may or may not work out, but if you work hard, you significantly improve your chances of doing well.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Sudhir. I totally concur with the point that PhDs make you kinder, and it's very evident from all three of you that it's your kindness that has sailed through this session. I'm now going to stop the screen so we can start the Q&A session. And I'm going to spotlight speakers so it's easier for people to engage. Great. Yes, so I have received a couple of questions in my direct chat. Let's try to sort of go through them before we have any other questions. So the first question is as follows. I'm currently in my second year of bachelor's. In which year should I apply for master's, and what are the things now I can work on to get selected? I think, Prarthana, you would be the best fit.
Yeah, so I think first of all, I think you need to apply in first semester of your third year. So, the deadlines are usually ranging from November to January, depending on the university you want to apply. So you can do that. Second, with respect to what you want to like what you can do to get a better application. First, study, get good grades. I think that's very important. Second is, depending on the degree that you want to pursue, you might want to look out for some internships that would, give you that experience. Because I was very confused initially what I wanted to do in life. So I think, doing some internships and, like volunteering sort of helped me clear my head, that okay, this is what I want to pursue, or this is what I want to do. So I think second year is a great time to do that, because yeah, you have a lot of coursework, but then it's not as much as third year. So probably you can do work on that and, get some experience, and then you will also have more clarity on what degree you want to pursue in masters. So yeah, I hope this helps.
Yeah. No, I think it does. And also one thing, I think all three of you mentioned this idea about trying to introspect and understand why you want to do what you want to do. And while it may be very early on, undergrad is just the beginning of a larger journey, it is always better to understand why a certain course appeals to you, and this reflects in your larger application portal as well, right? Applications, internships, essays, these are all really important. But once one is clear on what motivates them and why, it becomes easier for selectors to also narrow down your application. There's another question that I also received in the chat. Mohammad Azhar asks, what is the suitable and ethical way to apply for a PhD? Direct contact to supervisor or university application process is best, and possibility of funding as well. Claire, would you like to take that one?
Sure. It's a very complicated question, so I can see why you are asking it. It very much depends. What I would say is start with narrowing down where you want to apply, and then look at what the processes are in that country and even institution. In the UK, you should absolutely reach out to the supervisor first. They will help you through the application process. The application process for the institution and the application process for funding are separate. In the US, they're more often integrated, and you don't need to reach out to a individual supervisor first. It's still, I don't think it can hurt to try and have a conversation about your experience and see if you can get support, even from current PhD students, in terms of mentoring through that process. I actually just want to shout out Project EduAccess as a great way to get that kind of connection to people who are already in institutions that you might want to want to apply to. They obviously have a formal mentoring scheme that I'm sure Asma can tell you a bit more about how you sign up for that. And also just it would be a good way to, you can ask if you can reach out to people in their network to have an individual chat as well. Possibility of funding. Yeah, it completely depends by country. It also depends entirely on citizenship status. So I don't know your personal situation, but certainly there are more opportunities for home students in every place. So you will need to look into what is even open to you to apply for. I think both Prarthana and Sudhir would be better placed to talk about international student funding opportunities, because they left their home country. But yeah, I totally understand that even understanding what the kind of suitable way of applying it is very confusing. So don't worry that you are confused. Reach out to people and research.
Yeah, I think there is a question on GPA. Dr. Chandra Prakash asks, Dear team, my undergraduate percentage is low, i.e. 57%. Can you please suggest universities that will take me? My course preference is Masters in Public Health. I can start answering this question. I think every university has a different criteria for admissions, especially with regard to the GPA requirement. Some universities prefer a first, quote unquote, first class degree. What a first class degree means differs from country to country. For example, if you're applying from a country where the GPA system is weighted and is calculated out of 5, then a 3.7 is normal. If you're applying from India, I think many universities prefer 80, 60, or 70, but because every university in India is also very different with their marking, universities sort of understand why a certain candidate might have a lower percentage, but that would mean they're still ranked higher up with regards to how the university calculates. So my advice would be to definitely go to university web pages in their how to apply and admission eligibility criteria requirements. There are a lot of universities that will take in people with, for example, what you consider a low grade, which you said is 57 percentage. Especially in the UK, there are a lot of those universities. But as Claire and Prarthana had pointed out, one needs to be aware that some universities are just cashing on you, and there might not be a lot of scholarships for master's students. So one always has to sort of make this choice between, do I want to just get admitted into a university, which is very easy and fairly simple, or do I want to get admitted at a university where I might get a scholarship or financial aid? So would recommend researching across countries. And I will mention towards the end of the session that we have mentorship programs that Claire mentioned where we can help you directly in person on your application. There's another question, PhD timelines. Afzal Habib asks, I'm currently in the final year of my master's program and would like to know the typical application timelines for PhD programs in different regions. We've more or less covered this in the presentation when Claire and Prarthana talked about different universities across different countries, for example, UK versus US, Europe, and Australia. For example, Australia has a different timeline where it starts in the spring, whereas in the UK, things start in the fall. So maybe once the recording is finished, you can go over the presentation there.
I
Can I add to that?
Yes, Claire.
Usually in the US, as far as I understand, the application deadlines are a full year ahead. And in the UK, it's about 8 months ahead. So, for example, if you were applying for this coming fall, autumn start, probably most of the deadlines have passed already in January, but there will still be some that are open now. I think in Europe, there will still be some that are open in the spring. So yeah, it is worth checking on the application deadline as well, which will be, yeah, you're looking at 6 months to a year before you would be wanting to start the program. Oh, I think Sudhir has something to
Yeah,
add.
well, no, 100%. And to add, in the US, because funding and the application tend to go hand in hand, but in the UK particularly and Europe, if you're looking at external funding, look at those application deadlines too. And why that's important is some grants, etc., require you to have your application in hand, like you already been accepted, and then you can apply for the scholarship. And others are irrelevant. So it's almost two timelines that need to work together. It's a challenge, but it's not undoable. But just to keep it in mind.
Another question. I think, Sudhir, this is something you touched upon, but you could maybe take it or anybody else. It goes something like this. If our work is on a topic in India, is it better to look for a supervisor who is an expert on India or on the topic? I think that's a great question.
Yeah, no, that's a very, very good question. One of my supervisors, neither of my supervisors had a a deep knowledge of my topic. One did a lot of work on India, was the primary focus. The other was broadly South Asianist, but obviously knew a lot about India. Uh, I think it's a misnomer to say your supervisor has to have exactly the same knowledge base as you do, right? That they are the complete expert in that particular topic. I think you are that person. What your supervisors do should be to complement that and are able to challenge you and question you to think beyond that. So, for example, even though I was a political scientist, one supervisor was a social anthropologist and the other is a political theorist, right? And both helped me develop the project in different ways, etc. So it's really useful for them to have a functional knowledge about your topic, so not completely random. the area is useful because then there's similar realities that they're aware of. So anything you do on India, caste is a question that's overwhelming, right? So if it's somebody who has not fully grasped those concepts yet, they might not be able to fully provide the support that you would need. So even if it's somebody who's an expert on democracy, but largely American democracy, and if you wanted to focus on India, great. Like some of those deep, high-level universal theories are spectacular, but you also do have the option of having two supervisors or a whole panel. So perhaps you can complement that in different ways, and that would be useful. But again, the arrangement depends on which department you are, which other departments are close to you. So Claire and I went to King's College, where we did our PhDs around the same time. We had the India Institute there. So even if we were both working in theory on different subjects in different departments, we had the India Institute at least to give us that foundational knowledge on India. But even if universities don't have a South Asia center or an India center, there inevitably will be colleagues in that university or around. And I guarantee you, 8 out of 10 people, if you email them saying, can we meet for a call online just to talk about India stuff, they will happily speak with you. And I'm one of them. So feel free to email anytime you want.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add to it because I'm also working on India, but my supervisor is not. So he's working on the theory that I'm working on, and that is how I asked him to supervise. So of course he doesn't have any knowledge, but like Sudhir said, I have I have one member, another professor on the committee who is an India expert. So that sort of like helps me like balance out. And also like Sudhir has already spoken about like going for kind supervisors over like celebrity supervisor. I think that was the strategy I used, and it's working well for me so far.
Yeah, same applies to me too. My supervisor is a theme expert but has no idea about the region I work on. And it's fairly common to have that. And you can always sort of bank on other people in the department who, like Prarthana mentioned, can be region like experts but not theme experts. And this is here all of their advice on reaching out to people who have worked under similar supervisors applies. You can always like reach out to people on LinkedIn or somewhere else and ask them what is their relationship with the supervisor. And many graduate students would be happy to take on.
And the last point to add is when we say India, we also assume it's one small homogeneous unit when it's not. So most scholarship on India is largely focused still on North India. So, for example, if you're saying I'm studying Sri Lanka or I'm studying Tamil Nadu, it's equally alien to a lot of colleagues who are India experts in some ways. So it's just something to think about how best you think the combination of supervisors fit, and then the larger support system around you can help you.
Another question, Ethan J asks, any tips for standing out in PhD applications, barring the basics such as getting good grades and LORs? How much effort should one make to exhibit a major research gap and showing our departmental fit? Any small tips that just may help our application look better?
I have some views on this. Obviously, good grades and that sort of thing are important. I think you're right in the kind of the thing you're implying in your question, which is that actually showing your knowledge of the thing that you're proposing that you're going to research is actually the more important thing, because you are you're like the principal investigator on your own research project. That's what's happening when you're doing a PhD. So you're trying to show a few things. One, that your research is going to be original. So showing that you understand the existing research and that there is a gap is the main way to do that. So showing a really good understanding of the literature and also any kind of contemporary research that is being done. That can also be, for example, in professional research organizations, if you're doing a more policy or more policy oriented type project. So originality, and then also feasibility. So is what you are proposing doable within the timescale that you have? So generally for your own independent research, this is going to be a maximum of a couple of years. because you need time for writing up and you need time for training at the beginning. So it depends on the program, but do you have enough time and resources? And then the departmental fit, definitely. What expertise do you need to support the project? If you can make that really explicit, that will stand out. So you're not just applying for a PhD, you're applying for a PhD at that institution. And that's why I always say you should never submit the same application to different people. You have to, of course, your research project may be quite similar, but you have to personalize it. That's how to be persuasive. Departmental fit. I had one other thing to say, but I've forgotten. So I'll pass to the others, and if I remember, I'll jump back in.
Prarthana, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that it also depends from university to university, because some universities, I think, also require you to write a master's thesis. And some universities, I remember when I was applying to University of Oslo, I think they had this also requirement that you should have worked on that thesis for the entire semester. So again, I think, like some universities have specific requirements. For Sionspor, I think what matters is like what they ask you to submit during the application. Of course, apart from LORs and SOP, is your master's thesis, again a very important part of your application, and your grades in your master's. So you need to be like, the cutoff. So in France, the grading is out of 20. So your average should be more than 16 to even apply. So if your master's thesis grade is below 16, or your average is below 16, they won't probably even consider your application. So that was, yeah, one of the criterias at Sionspor.
I remembered what the fourth thing is. So it's originality, feasibility, departmental fit, and then also, are you the right person to do that research? So your grades feed into this. Are you have you shown so far that you're up to the challenge, but also other experience? So I think somebody in the chat asked about work experience and how and whether or not that's useful. Yes, if there's a link. So working generally in the field, you might kind of struggle to say, oh, I've worked in politics, so I should study politics. But if it's more specific than that, if, for example, you've worked for an NGO and you're going to research a kind of social theme or idea that's related to the work you were doing, certainly you should talk about that, because that really justifies that you and shows that you already have relevant expertise. So that's the four things I would say. And yeah, good grades is just one part of that.
Yeah, I have two quick points, and fully agreeing with everything Prarthana and Claire said, right? But whenever you're writing any form of personal statement, etc., because I've just come to the state in my life when I've started looking at PhD applications and such, come across as being really authentic. I think sometimes we try to inflate our abilities at that level and overstate some of those things. It's okay when you're looking at PhD. We understand that if you are 22 years old, 23 years old, you probably are learning and growing and developing, and that's the metrics that we will evaluate you on, right? So just try to be as authentic as possible. Try not to overstate, because then it just gives a slightly negative impression when applications are coming through and such. So be factual, be evidence-based, and as authentic as possible. And then the last one is also, interesting projects are really interesting to work with, right? As a PhD supervisor, if it's something that's really interesting to me, I'm more likely to take it on. So be bold, be exciting. So if you want to think of photo voice as a tool of research methodology, how spectacular would that be? If you're thinking of a thing that has not been studied, that would also be really useful. Because remember, as supervisors, if we're supervising for 3-4 years, we are also learning with you throughout the process. So what a great chance for us in our own professional learning and development to work with you, through you, and you as a PI, but also it's a learning experience for us as supervisors too. So keep that in mind too.
Yeah, before we continue, I want to remind everyone that we're out of time. So only if you feel like you can dedicate a few more minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, can we continue. If you feel like to any of the speakers, if you feel like your time, you're busy and you have some other commitments, please feel free to stop here. And if not, we just have a couple of questions. Some of them I've answered in chat. So would you mind staying 5 more minutes or? Great, that's great. Thank you so much. One question I got in my personal chat was, is it true that there are more job opportunities in PhD when it's done from the US as opposed to UK or Europe?
Yeah. The US PhD is longer, so you are more you're kind of more prepared to go into the job market. But it totally depends on so many things that it's a very difficult question to answer. Especially if you do not have the right to work. But that's kind of the primary thing that will organize whether or not you have lots of access to job opportunities. And then also, I missed in the question if do you mean any job or an academic job?
I think it doesn't say anything, but it's
Hmm.
I think it means job prospects in general. Or you could
Yeah,
also think about it in academia, if that
yeah.
makes
In academia, I would say there maybe are more prospects in the US. Generally, it's very hard to say because if you've not started your PhD yet, the world is moving so fast. We can't say that in 4 years' time, the economic realities of the different countries are probably going to be very different to now. So I wouldn't rely on it. But yeah, I hope, yeah, from my perspective, it's very difficult to make that comparison in a way that will be useful in the future. But yeah, in academia broadly, I would say there are more jobs in the US, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you will have access to them or even that they're good jobs, it depends what you're looking for. Yeah, if you want to work in academia after doing a PhD, you can, but where are you prepared to live is kind of the big question.
And 100%. And the point is, most likely be prepared to move, because jobs, if you get a job, you take it, right? So traveling across the country, if you're lucky enough overseas, etc., etc. But that's something to definitely think about for sure. I think US is a question of numbers also. So they just have a lot more universities, so more jobs might be on the table. But as Claire said, it's such an unpredictable world right now. So if you're banking on doing a PhD for an academic job, do more research about it. And there's things like the Times Higher Education portal that gives you a little bit more prospects on trends and trajectories. But yeah, particularly if you're looking at getting into academia, genuinely spend the time to think about how the world is changing and where you think it could be going. And there are a lot of smart people tweeting about this, writing about this, and thinking about this. So follow them. Claire, I know, is one of them, so I'll pass it to her.
One more thing, if you want to get an academic job after your PhD, spend your PhD trying to publish in top journals. That's the number one thing. And that's across the board. There are other things that feed into it, but if you've published in a Q1 journal while still a PhD student, you will get a job. That's the state of things as it stands. But especially those of us here who are either on or approaching being on the job market, it's not a walk in the park. Having a PhD does not guarantee you a job in academia. It may help you get a job outside of academia.
Yeah, I think we just have a last question. Little unrelated, it says. I would like to specifically ask a question about Central European University. I want to apply to sociology department, although my research area and interest isn't matching with the available supervisors. I want to work on sociology of health, and only one professor has this in her bio, that she's interested in health, but also other 10 social areas unrelated to my interests. So my question is, would it be a good decision to apply at all? I do find many matching supervisors in political science, but they accept only political science background candidates.
Um,
Prarthana might be best to answer this.
I think that if they've done a master's in something else, I think a lot of people are hesitant to take people in like for a PhD in political science, but also even if they have one, like of course I think a lot of us have a lot of like varied research interests. So if she has sociology, or if they have like sociology of health on their bio, probably they might work on it. I think it's also a good idea to take a look at Google Scholar if they have published anything, in the field that they want, like you want to work in, going ahead. So probably you can take a look at that. And yeah, also like maybe talk to people who she's supervising, or like they're supervising at the moment. So you will have a better idea of if this is something that would be would fits to what you want to do, and then you can apply to CU accordingly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Please email the supervisor.
yeah, I would say because there are other factors other than like the supervisor may be on research leave, the supervisor may be full. So I don't think it says in your question, Tanya, why you only want to apply to CEU. But I would try and address all of those things before you make a decision, because yeah, if you are banking on one supervisor, yeah, as everyone else has said, you will just have to speak to them directly in that specific case. But there are other universities in those cities, so if it's about living in those places, CEU is across a few places as far as I understand. Budapest and Vienna. Or did it move recently?
I think it's in Vienna.
Okay.
The last I know, I think it's in Vienna.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's just a last question that has popped up, and it's a question that deserves a seminar of its own. It asks, are there any risks posed by AI to humanities degrees, especially those as politics, international relations? Would anybody like to comment on that?
I think that's a problem for the universities, and you don't need to worry about it too much. I maybe assume that you're thinking, will the degree be devalued by the rise of AI? But I don't think any of us can know. That's one of those things where we could probably talk about it for hours and not come to an answer. Politics and international relations is usually categorized as social science rather than humanities, which does, I mean, the humanities are great. You study the humanities, but it does work in the favor of social science subjects, that they're kind of considered more, the way the world is at the moment, kind of the sciences are considered more important. So yeah, don't use AI to write your application. That's all I can say on that. We are used to marking, so we can tell, and so can the professors.
Yeah, I think with that we have come to an end. Thank you so much, Prarthana, Claire, and Sudhir. This was a wonderful session. I learned a lot about PhD applications. So I'm sure many of our audience members must have been delighted from all this information they've gathered. Of course, take time to marinate and decide. You still have time. And remember, all's end well. Whatever you decide is the best thing that would be there for you. Just a final note, if you need any more guidance on writing application documents, or need some more information on university applications, or even a scholarship, we have conducted a lot of sessions which are available online, and I've shared the link to many of these sessions, including this one, which will be uploaded on our YouTube channel, and you would be free to access it from our YouTube, and also other links that are available on our Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and other sort of websites. Thank you so much to all of you for attending, and we wish you all the best with your applications or any other career endeavors you embark on. With that, I think we can end the session.
Take care, everybody. Good luck.
Thanks so much.
Best of luck, everyone.